Yeah, so just very quickly, just to show hands, is anybody in this room interested in the China market? Not surprising given there's 1.4 billion people now living in mainland China, and last year I think around 100 million basically travelled outside of mainland China, and I think that's roughly growing at a rate of about 10% year on year now. So obviously there are a lot of brands, there are a lot of travel companies, luxury brands that are obviously all trying to get into China to tap into a huge revenue stream. But with that comes a lot of different challenges. So hopefully today I can just sort of share some best practices and just give you some insight into really what's going on in terms of the challenges of getting inside China. So obviously everybody's heard of the Great Firewall of China. Everybody, I'm sure, has heard of it. And what it really means to any organization that's trying to get their website or application into China is load times. And what we're seeing on average for people that don't have their websites inside China is load times of 33 seconds on your homepage. And in our world today, everybody knows that if your website's not loading within probably 4 seconds, right, people will abandon because I always say there's no loyalty on the internet, right? Because if you can get what you want from somewhere else, then that's exactly where you're going to go. You're not going to wait 33 seconds for a website to load, well, unless it's the only place in the world where you can get that particular product. So basically, this was a little bit about the three piggies that tried to get into China. Well, it was a bit more than 3 little piggies. It was a meat production company that tried to get into China. And because they have very sophisticated logarithm software that run, and they have thousands of these cyber offices that monitor the internet now in terms of content inside China, unfortunately, because the skin tones very much are similar to our skin tones, basically it was considered pornography. Right? So we're not going to get into a whole discussion on sex because that was discussed this morning. So we don't need to go on and talk about that anymore. So interesting enough, and given that obviously pornography in China is illegal, along with lots of other content that's illegal, the site was blocked. So it was actually shut down. And the problem with that, well, I'll come on to that in a second. So what some people are obviously trying to do to improve website performance in China is to move their hosting closer, so to get it right sort of next door to the Great Firewall, which is effectively sort of Singapore, Hong Kong. So basically, if you're currently, say, hosting in the US or you're hosting in the UK, what customers will do is they'll move their hosting actually to Singapore, Hong Kong to try and improve the performance of the loading of their web pages. But again, that's fraught with problems as well. And then what happens is you get blocked. Right? And the problem is when you get blocked by the Chinese government, your URL, your top-level domain, your www.com or /cn, once that's blocked, that's hasta la vista, as in you will never be in China again. There's no negotiation with the Chinese government, there's no communication, there's no let's sit down and have a little chat, cup of tea to talk about it. It doesn't matter if you're Hugo Boss with your Swatch group, if you're G-Star, if you're Shell, it doesn't matter who you are, you can be one of the biggest brands in the world. Right? Well, Google is the biggest brand in the world, and they can't get into China, right? So, so that's the reality. And of course, if your website actually does get into China, then obviously the problem is then there's massive latency issues inside China because you've got what we call sort of the north and south divide. China is very fragmented. I mean, you've got 600 cities in China with about a population of 1 million each just in 600 cities in China. So we've got a population of 1.4 billion, so that's not even half the population. But unfortunately, all the ISPs and all the telcos in China, they don't all talk to each other. So you have this massive fragmentation. So you could be, so you could have a lot of users and seeing a lot of traffic coming from Beijing, for example, but then down south of China, you could have massive latency issues on the website and have no traffic coming from your Chinese customers in southern China. So obviously again, if you're hosting your website within China, the most important thing is the licenses. Without getting the necessary licenses from the Chinese government, you cannot host your website in China. And there really are sort of two main licenses, really. The main ones are the ICP license, if you plan on having any type of shopping cart or e-commerce transaction payment gateways on the website, and your Bayan registration, which fundamentally is for all websites, because obviously not all websites are e-commerce. They could be static, or they could be sort of more like brochureware, that are then going to redirect them back to, say, a .com site where they're actually going to do the payment. But that's incredibly important, that you have the correct licenses before you even think about having your website or your brand in China. So what now? So basically, to overcome these challenges, so what we do to overcome these challenges is we effectively build a secure tunnel, sort of effectively over the internet through the Great Firewall, which allows us to accelerate customers' websites and applications inside of China. So we've effectively spent probably the last 10 years in China. We've been working very closely with the Chinese government for the last 10 years because the regulatory, the rules, the processes can literally change from day to day, right? They make a decision, that's the decision, it gets enforced and everybody has to comply. Again, there's no discussion, there's no negotiation, right? They make the rules and everybody has to comply. But it just means from a customer's point of view, from point of view of thinking about CapEx and OpEx expenditure, there's, you don't have to consider and worry about that. And then obviously, as you said, it's having the in-country experts that obviously understand the language, understand the culture, understand the processes to get things done to make sure that you get all the correct licenses. So you almost view it as a fully integrated managed service, which is effectively what it ends up being. And if you do care about China, then obviously find a CDN that has the China expertise. Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a couple of things that are really important. One, most importantly, you have to have a China entity inside of China. You can't launch any type of website unless you've got a China entity, right? That's incredibly important. And as I said earlier, a lot of customers will host outside of China if they don't have an entity. And yes, you can deliver the website into China, but again, you've got latency issues, so there's no guarantee. I mean, I was talking to someone earlier, and they'd mentioned that China's important, but they were getting no traffic from China. They weren't seeing any traffic from China. Interesting enough, we'd run some performance monitoring on their site, and unfortunately, their website was loading in something like 18 seconds. So surprise, surprise, they're not going to get any traffic from China, right? So local coverage, obviously very important to be able to deal with north and south divide to be able to cover all of mainland China. You need overall good performance just given the size of the population and the people that you're trying to reach. Again, local know-how and expertise in terms of people on the ground that really understand what's going on inside of China. And obviously having really good relationships with all the local ISPs and telcos is also incredibly important. So feel free, you please go onto the website. You can actually test your website load time in China now, so you can do that from your mobile if you want to, or you can do it from your desktop, and we'll email you the results. As you said, some people that we've spoken to today were quite shocked when we showed them how their website was performing in China. They had no idea, absolutely had no idea how long it was taking to load versus US or Europe or Southeast Asia. So yeah, that was it. Thank you.